everyone, welcome to Legal Bytes. I'm Alyte. I'm a lawyer, and on this channel we explain the law one bite at a time. Okay, so provocative title, I know. But the purpose of this video is not so much to be provocative for the clicks or to garner love or hate from any political persuasion. I've just gotten some people asking me about what is going on with our election right now, and so I figured I would do my best to take a very basic, middle-of-the-road approach to explain the American presidential electoral process, where we are in that process, and what we might be able to expect in the coming weeks or months. Because let's face it, there are a lot of people talking about the election right now, but it can be kind of hard to find some people giving a middle-of-the-road approach. So that's exactly what we're going to try to do here. Coming on up on Legal Bytes. So, unless you've been stuck on Tatooine for the last year, you're probably aware of the fact that on November 3rd, the United States had a general election. In the United States, elections happen at all kinds of times, but the general presidential election happens once every 4 years, kind of like the Summer Olympics, when there isn't a global pandemic or a world war. This year, the election was, again, as you probably know, between the Democratic Party candidate Joe Biden and the Republican Party candidate Donald Trump. On November 7th, American news media outlets called the election for Joe Biden, meaning that looking at the numbers, they predicted that Joe Biden has won. Normally when that happens, everyone kind of agrees as to who won, and we move on to whatever the latest scandal is in the 24-hour news cycle. But in this case, Donald Trump and the Republican Party are saying, not so fast.
By all indications today, the president wants to keep fighting all the way to the Supreme Court.
They've filed lawsuits in several states, making claims in each lawsuit about either improper processing of mail-in ballots or issues as to the Electoral Commission's not allowing Republicans to oversee the vote tally, etc. In other words, at the time of filming of this video, President Trump still hasn't conceded the election. And yet, former Vice President Biden has been projected to be the winner by pretty much all of the big media channels. So some people are asking, what's really going on here? Is Mr. Biden the president-elect or not? Is this just a situation of Donald being Donald, so to speak? Is he just being a sore loser? Or worse, is he trying to mess with our electoral system? Or on the other hand, are there legitimate issues that he's fighting for in the courts right now? Is the election being stolen from him by the popular media? I'm not sure that I can answer all of those questions, but I can at least give some perspective on the situation by looking at the process. To do that, first we'll look over what you need to know about the presidential electoral system. Then we'll pinpoint where we are in the process and kind of where it differs from most other election situations. Then I'll give a conclusion. Okay, let's get into it. So as I mentioned before, every 4 years on the first Tuesday of November, the United States has a general election for the office of the President of the United States. Contrary to popular belief, adults over 18 who are voting in the general election are actually not electing the president. They're electing electors who elect the president. Those electors are part of the Electoral College. And that's why the United States is actually not a democracy. It's a republic, or maybe a democratic republic. To understand how we got the electoral system that we did, you have to go back to the early days of the United States as an independent nation. Although now it seems kind of weird to think of the United States as centrally weak, at the very beginning it actually was more of a motley group of ragtag states that were more preoccupied with maintaining their own autonomy than with the union of those states as a whole. Part of that was just because of the experience of them having operated as distinct colonies. But another part of that was an extreme distrust of a strong central government, thanks to their experiences being ruled by what they saw as a despotic monarch for many, many years. So putting together a governmental system that kept the states from seceding from the Union was a huge first challenge. In 1781, they thought they had it figured out when they decided to run the United States under a document called the Articles of Confederation. It gave all the power to the individual states and had all kinds of craziness that just ended up proving to be just an unworkable arrangement. So they scrapped it, and in 1788, they ratified the United States Constitution. I love American history. So there were still issues with the new document, which would eventually lead to the Civil War. However, setting that aside, the Constitution gave us our basic electoral system, and it also gave us certain checks and balances between the different states and within the federal government. You see, one of the big issues that the early United States was dealing with was the fact that they didn't really have much of a national identity that could unify the entire population. And then on top of that, you had states that didn't really want to work together. But you also had this problem. Not only was there a growing divide in economic systems between the northern states and the southern states, but also different states were different sizes, both geographically and in terms of population. And this really mattered when it came time to figure out how each state was going to send representatives to Congress. Big states wanted to have representation in Congress to be determined by the population of each state. Small states, on the other hand, wanted it to be so that each state sent the same number of representatives regardless of size or population. Obviously, a population-based representation favors states with more people. They get to send more representatives, which means the bigger states generally have much stronger voices in Congress when determining the overall policy of the United States. And then on the other hand, obviously the flat rate representation favored the smaller states because each person in that state has more of a political say because there are fewer people per representative. Either way, you end up with someone getting the short end of the stick. So what they did was they decided to compromise. They split Congress into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Each state, no matter how big, sends 2 senators to the Senate, and each state is represented by as many members of the House as there are districts, which are determined by population size every time a new census is completed. Compromise. So, when it came time to figure out how to elect the President of the United States, they made a similar compromise. Specifically, they said each state gets to send a certain number of electors to the Electoral College. The number that each state sends will be decided by the number of representatives that they have in Congress. That means that each state has a minimum of 3 electors, 2 for the 2 senators, and 1 for the minimum 1 representative in the House of Representatives. So, for example, states like Montana have 3 representatives. States like California, Texas, and New York each have many more. And according to the laws prescribed in the Constitution and in Title III of the U.S. Code, each state gets to figure out how they want to go about the process of awarding those Electoral College votes. Some states have it so that the Electoral College votes are given to whomever gets the popular vote in that state. Others, however, do it according to the district level. The differences in processing between the states is all by design, of course, because, again, the founders distrusted a strong central government and wanted to leave a lot of power to the states. Anyway, once the ballot count begins after election polls begin to close across the country, we start to see projections being made by the media. They have all kinds of tools and strategies to figuring this stuff out, and sometimes a determination is made almost immediately. For example, states like California and New York are generally going to vote for the Democratic Party candidate. Texas is usually a reliably Republican state, although that wasn't immediately the case this year. Other states, however, are considered battleground states and require more watching before a determination is made. Whatever the method, once a final count is figured out, the electors vote in their states. This always falls in December, on the Monday after the second Wednesday. I'm not making that up. That's actually how it's written in the statute. This election year, that turns out to be December 14th. The electors vote by paper ballot, then count the results and certify their votes. Then, on December 23rd this year, those electoral vote certificates will need to be delivered to several different places, including the current vice president who serves as the president of the U.S. Senate. Then, on January 6th, a joint session of Congress meets to count their electoral votes and declare election results. Because there are 539 electors in the Electoral College, the first candidate to get to 270 wins. Side note, if neither side gets 270 votes, Congress determines who wins. That's how President John Quincy Adams was elected in 1824. And then he only served 1 term and was replaced by a populist, President Andrew Jackson, who was almost actually killed on Inauguration Day by a stampede of incredibly enthusiastic voters back when, you could randomly wander into the White House. Anyway, getting back on track. So on January 6th, the official electoral votes are counted up by the House and the Senate, and the winner is declared. The winner then gets inaugurated as the official president of the United States on January 20th. So we have this whole process that's laid out, and in every presidential election, we actually go through each step. It never really gets any attention, however, because we normally figure out who the winner is long before then, and the candidate projected to lose concedes. What will happen is the media will call a projected winner.
The battleground state of Ohio for President Barack Obama, which means you are looking at the President of the United States. Barack Obama has been reelected.
And then whoever's projected to lose concedes. Then we basically have a declared winner, albeit unofficially. Sometimes, though, the media gets it wrong. Like the election of 1948, when the Chicago Tribune called the election for Governor Thomas Dewey. Everyone expected him to win, and so the Tribune ran the presses and, well, that's not Governor Dewey holding that newspaper up. That's Harry Truman, who ended up actually winning the election. Other times, no one concedes for a while because the election runs a little closely. That was the case in the 2000 election, with Vice President Al Gore running against Governor George W. Bush. Vice President Gore did not concede the election until over a month after the election day because of issues he had related to the counting of votes in Florida. After he lost the infamous lawsuit Bush v. Gore, he conceded and the United States had a settled winner. So what the heck is going on right now? I mean, other than obviously you hitting the like button and subscribing and hitting the notification bell, right? Okay, so to make sure that we're all on the same page, Election Day was obviously Tuesday, November 3rd. The common projection by pollsters, talking heads, and generally everyone in the mainstream media going into the election seemed to be that this was likely to be a landslide victory for Biden. And as we know, it proved to be a super tight race in the presidential ticket. As the ballots rolled in, states were moving from pink to light blue or vice versa, until one by one the media started to make projections. But even as the map started to fill in, after a few days it still wasn't clear as to who was likely to win. And from the very beginning, Trump started filing lawsuits in several states, and for various allegations. In Michigan, for example, the lawsuit alleges that the people running the ballot counting were not allowing people representing the Republican Party to observe the ballot count. Generally speaking, the counting of ballots should be open and transparent to prevent fraud, or even the allegation of fraud. Anyway, despite those lawsuits, states were tallying up the ballots coming in from different sources: early voting, election day ballots, and mail-in ballots. As they continued tallying up, more projections were being made about particular states, and those states were looking like they were going for Biden. So, on Saturday, November 7th, the major media outlets projected Joe Biden to be the overall winner of the election. Following that, Vice President Biden and Senator Harris gave victory speeches Saturday night. People in D.C. gathered at the gates around the White House to celebrate. People in other metropolitan areas got together to celebrate as well. Foreign heads of state started congratulating Joe Biden. But all at the same time, President Trump still hasn't conceded. If Trump does concede, then yeah, we can all comfortably call Joe Biden the president-elect. But until Trump does concede, technically, we need to follow the steps laid out by the Constitution and by federal statute before a winner is declared. I mean, if you think about it, that's the whole reason why we have a system like this in place, is precisely for contentious elections. So if you follow those steps very closely, technically Joe Biden is not the president-elect until the Electoral College votes are gathered, certified, and tallied in December and January. Whether you care about those technicalities right now may come down to your level of enthusiasm for a Biden victory or a Trump victory. So why has President Trump not conceded yet? Admittedly, there are a lot of possible answers to that question, but one of those could be that he's waiting until after he sees the results of the litigation he's filed in various states, kind of like what Al Gore did in 2000. So you may be thinking, okay, but what's the likelihood that Trump even wins these lawsuits in the first place? That, of course, is another question. Having years of litigation experience myself, I can say that as a default, litigation is always a gamble to some extent. There are always factors that can roll against you or for you, and you can't necessarily control them. But beyond that, without getting into the weeds on these particular lawsuits, the general consensus seems to be that the likelihood of Trump winning those lawsuits is not super strong. On top of that, even if he wins those lawsuits, the likelihood that winning those lawsuits will translate to those states then flipping into his favor looks even more distant at this point. But could Trump win? I mean, yeah, there's a chance. Even if there's not a high chance, there's a chance. And if he were to win, it definitely would make for an awkward walk back by the media. And those heads of state that have congratulated Biden so far would have potentially a really awkward working relationship with Trump moving forward. And that's maybe why the Mexican president has actually said explicitly that he's not recognizing Joe Biden as the president-elect yet. But he's recently even dug in his heels, saying that it would be interventionism for him to congratulate Biden before it's official. Who knew that of all countries to stand next to Trump, it would be Mexico, right? 2020 is a weird year. So, can Biden be legally referred to as the president-elect? Kinda. I guess for political reasons it makes for a strong showing by putting forward a definite belief that the Biden-Harris ticket won. It certainly gives him social momentum in the eyes of the public. But there's also nothing requiring Trump to concede at this point. Technically, the presidential electoral process lasts all the way until early January. If Trump wants to wait it out until every last lawsuit is over, like Al Gore did back in 2000, that's perfectly legal. Wise, unwise, I don't know. I leave that part to political pundits. And you guys, let us know what you think. Should Trump concede? Should he not concede? Should we continue referring to Biden as the president-elect? Let us know in the comments. All I ask on this one is that you please be kind. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. We're really trying to walk a balanced line here, and hopefully we accomplish that. So if you hit the like button, it does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods, and it helps us know if we balance this well enough. And for that matter, commenting helps us too. Give us all your thoughts. And if you're new to our channel and you want to see more videos like this one, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when our next video is out there. Thanks.